Today, we're going to talk about penicillin. And look, this is way more than just a story about medicine. It's really about a discovery that completely changed what it means to be human. And it all happened because of some incredible luck and some people who just refused to give up. So let me ask you a strange question. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale, right? Could a rose thorn kill you? I mean, it sounds almost silly, but just think about it for a second. Could a tiny little scratch from a rose in your garden actually, kill you? Well, the answer is yes, because in 1941, it happened. The whole story of penicillin is kind of wrapped up in this one tragic case of a man whose life proved just how powerful this new drug was, but also how incredibly fragile that discovery was. To really get how much of a miracle penicillin was, you have to imagine the world before it. And honestly, it was a pretty terrifying place, where any little injury could basically be a death sentence. Okay, check out this number, 47. That's it. In the early 1900s, that was the average life expectancy. I mean, less than 50 years old. And the reason why it was so low, that's what's really insane. Yeah, you heard that right. The number one killer wasn't any of the big diseases we worry about today. It was infection. A simple cut, a scrape on your knee, that could turn into blood poisoning, and there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it. And, I mean, things were just unbelievably dangerous. Think about this. During World War I, if you got shot, you were actually more likely to die from the wound getting infected than from the bullet itself. Hospitals weren't really places you went to get better. They were often just where you went to die from an infection. So yeah, the world was absolutely desperate for some kind of cure. And when it finally showed up, it wasn't some big dramatic moment. It was a quiet observation in a really, really messy lab. So picture this, it's September 1928. There's this scientist, Alexander Fleming, who's known for being, let's say, not the tidiest guy. He gets back from vacation and starts cleaning up a pile of old Petri dishes. But then he notices something weird. On one of the dishes, there's this patch of mold, and all around it, the deadly staph bacteria he was growing, it's just gone. It's been wiped out. He saw what he called a halo of death. It was this perfectly clear ring where the mold was literally killing one of the most dangerous bacteria on the planet. Most people would have just thrown a contaminated dish in the trash. But Fleming, he took a closer look. And his reaction to seeing this world-changing phenomenon, just 2 words. That's funny. And that quiet little thought, well, it was about to change everything. But this is where the story gets so frustrating. The discovery was made, but the miracle cure, it was nowhere close to being reality. So Fleming figured out what the mold was producing. He called it penicillin, but he just hit a brick wall. The stuff was so unstable, it would break down in a few hours, and he could only make the tiniest little bit of it. So after a few years, he basically just gave up. He wrote a paper about it and moved on. And for a whole decade, the most important medical discovery in history just sat on a shelf, totally forgotten. But thank goodness the story didn't end there. 10 years later, a completely different team over at Oxford University just happens to find Fleming's old obscure paper and thinks, maybe we should give this another shot. And this is where the real race starts. These 2 scientists, Howard Florey and Ernst, they figured out the puzzle that Fleming couldn't. They learned how to actually purify penicillin and keep it stable. And their work led to one of the most dramatic experiments you can imagine. I mean, just look at how clear this is. They took 8 mice and gave them all a deadly dose of bacteria. They gave penicillin to 4 of them and did nothing for the other 4. The result? By the next morning, the 4 untreated mice were all dead. The 4 who got the penicillin, they were totally fine. It was undeniable proof. This stuff worked. But now they had a huge new problem. The amount of penicillin you need for a tiny mouse is one thing, but for a full-grown human, you need literally thousands of times more. The team turned their entire lab into a penicillin factory, growing mold in bedpans, bathtubs, whatever they could get their hands on. And it still wasn't nearly enough. And that brings us back to the policeman and the rose thorn. In 1941, Albert Alexander became their first human patient. He was literally dying from that tiny scratch, which had turned into a massive infection. They gave him all the penicillin they had, and it was a miracle. He started getting better. His fever went down, the infection pulls back, but then, after just 5 days, they ran out. The infection came roaring back, and he died. His death was a tragedy, but it proved 2 things beyond any doubt. Penicillin was a miracle, and they had to find a way to make more of it. So with Britain being bombed in the war, Florey got on a plane and flew to America. He actually smuggled a sample of the mold in his coat pocket, hoping that the industrial power of the US could finally solve the production problem. So they launched this massive, worldwide hunt for a better version of the mold, a super strain that could pump out way more penicillin. So where do you think they found it? Some high-tech government lab? A remote jungle somewhere? Nope. The big breakthrough came from a moldy cantaloupe that a lab assistant brought in from a local market in Peoria, Illinois. Her name was Mary Hunt, and she got the nickname Moldy Mary because she was always bringing in moldy stuff to test. Well, one day, she brought in the jackpot. The mold strain from this one rotting cantaloupe produced 200 times more penicillin than Fleming's original. 200 times! This was the key. This was what finally made mass production possible. The US government threw everything at this. They made penicillin a top military secret. By the time D-Day happened in 1944, they had enough to treat every single Allied soldier who was wounded. And just look at the difference it made. In World War I, the death rate from bacterial pneumonia was 18%. In World War II, with penicillin, it was less than 1%. It was a true secret weapon. So Fleming, Florey, and Chain all won the Nobel Prize in 1945. The world was celebrating this incredible new miracle drug. But in his speech, Fleming gave everyone a warning that was, well, terrifyingly accurate. He said that as soon as the drug was available to everyone, people would start misusing it. He warned that if people didn't take the full dose, they would teach bacteria how to survive the drug, creating resistant superbugs. The man who started it all also saw exactly how it could all go wrong. But you really can't overstate the good it's done. I mean, penicillin and the antibiotics that came after it have saved, at a minimum, 200 million lives. They essentially doubled how long we live. Modern medicine, things like complex surgery, organ transplants, chemotherapy, none of it would be possible without antibiotics. Our entire medical world is built on this one accidental discovery. And that brings us right back to today, because Fleming's warning, it came true. We are facing a massive crisis with antibiotic resistance. So the story of penicillin leaves us with this really big, urgent question. We got to live through this amazing age of antibiotics, but that age might be coming to an end. Are we ready for whatever comes next?